We're going to welcome our UX team to the stage. They're going to talk about some of their findings from K12 educators, where they perform different research groups to hear straight from the users on feedback from their students and from day-to-day use cases. So Samantha, I'm going to hand it back over to you to introduce Sam and Araceli from our UX team.
Thank you, Ashley, for that introduction. As Ashley mentioned, we're diving into solution with two of our UX designers here at OET, and talking through some of the practices that they use to approach designing a solution like TAO Classroom. So it's my pleasure to introduce them to you today. Today we have with us Sam Sipaseth, is the UX lead at Open Assessment Technologies, bringing 10 years of experience in the assessment industry, the first 5 of which were focused on implementing assessment standards in TAO, such as the QTI standard, PCIs, and more. Over the last 5 years, Sam has focused on developing the design department and design thinking practices at OET in order to infuse the end user's perspective in all steps of the solution definition process. More recently, Sam has had an active hand in defining TAO Classroom, conducting user research activities to ensure TAO Classroom delivers a satisfying user experience to all educators. We also have with us today Araceli Gonzalez. She is the UX designer here at OAT, where she advocates for users through research and design of solutions to address their problems. Prior to joining up with OAT, Araceli attained a master's in human-computer interaction from the City University of London. She approaches her work with a human-centered mindset, allowing her to better understand the needs, motivations, and concerns of users. So without further ado, we'll get the presentation started, and I will turn this over to Araceli and Sam.
Thank you very much, Sam, for the introduction. So hello, everybody. So thank you for joining this session. So we are very excited to share with you how we are conducting our user research activity review. So Dragos just presented so the idea of TAO Classroom. So this session now is objective for us to take us into the backstage so we can have an idea of how we are running this designing ideation session. So I'm really going to start sharing my screen. Go. All right, so today we're going first to recap what we mean by user-centric design and the benefit of it. Then we're going to share with you the process that we're following to conduct our research activities at OAT, and also what we did for TAO Classroom. After that, Araceli is going to share some we find interesting insight and findings that we get out of this research. Then we conclude with the next step that we're thinking in terms of our research activities for TAO Classroom. So what we mean by user-centric design, this is actually simply focusing on the user's needs at every step of the solution definition and development process. So in practice, it means focusing on understanding our users. So learning about and knowing very well their working context, their habits, their goals, also their day-to-day challenges. So we use an iterative qualitative research approach to bring that information to the solution definition phase, during which we want to ensure that we are already solving the right problem for our users and that we're solving it in an appropriate way, and that overall solution is usable given the context of use. So I keep using the word users because it's kind of jargon that we use within the UX designers, but in our context, assessment context, we mean every people who will be using our TAO Classroom product. So here we are showing a lot of educators. So we are targeting the research for now on the educators, but we are thinking also to expand the research for all the different people involved. So students, their parents, the principal of the schools, but also the professionals that are creating the content behind it. So the benefit of this approach are numerous, but here I just pick 4 main ones that I want to discuss with you today. So first, it helps us to be closer to our users, right? So we learn directly from them by interacting with them. So it helps us to be more empathetic towards their challenges, their pain points, so we can bring that information to the solution definition team, so we can design solutions that better fit their needs. So that's number one. Number two, it also helps us to be more creative, because by exposing iterative of solutions to our end users, so to the teacher, to the educators, we are able to get another angle, another perspective to our solutions. So this interaction brings us always new ideas that we may not have thought about during our ideation phase, that we can bring and incorporate into our new iteration of the design. So the next benefit I'd like to mention is it helps us also to mitigate the risk for costly errors, because this iterative loop that we put in place between us, so the solution team, and our target audience, help us to identify any big errors, discrepancy between the expectation and our solution as early as possible, and most importantly, ahead of any costly development work. And finally, something I would like to mention, it also increases the chance of the adoption of our solution, and therefore the assessment programs or the educational programs that are using our product, because we are ensuring indeed the engagement of the users, so the educator, for example, to using our solution, which will contribute positively to the outcome of that assessment program. So now the process. So the process is, as I mentioned before, iterative. We run this research process in iterative and successive studies. So every study follows the same steps that I'm going to describe now. So we start with the clear definition of the research goal. So at this step, basically what we do is within the product team, we sit together, we collect all the different assumptions, the questions that we come up with during the ideation phase. And we clearly identify the audience, so our users, that this is a set of assumptions and questions should be answered by. And after we've got this information, we move on to the next step, which is recruitment, finding our users. So this is very important for user research, because they will give us the quality of data that we need. So we are usually using here an external and professional recruitment service to target the profile of the users that we need. We'll also run some background check to ensure so the different validity of the profile that we are going to meet, and also to ensure the different variety of the participant, because at this stage we want a good coverage in terms of the different type of institutions, different type of teachers profiles that we want, so we are not biased into a specific use case or specific institution. Next, we move on to the studies. So we only run individual studies, because it enables us to build reports and confidence with that person, so they can share very in depth all they have, in heart, right? So this is very important for us, and we always run our session in 2 different steps. So a session lasts about 2 hours, and we always split them in 2. So the first hour is about understanding their working context. So it's an interview format where we ask a lot of open questions, so we can really understand their day-to-day process, what is working well for them, what is not. So we can learn a lot about, so the current context. Then the next step, in the same session, is always a prototype evaluation. So we always prepare interactive prototype for them to interact with. So we ask them to accomplish certain tasks that will be relevant for the day-to-day job. And they will tell us what is working for them, what is not working for them, and what is fitting the content, what is not. So we can bring that information onto the synthesis phase. So this information that we collect, then we review them, we watch recordings again, and with my real researcher, so Hasili, we collect all this information, we discuss them, we ensure that we are not biased and misunderstanding the different interpretations that we get out of these interviews. And we also cluster the information in a way that we can clearly identify the different interesting themes and findings and insights that we can want to bring to the group. So after this learning has been done, right, we bring that again to the product definition group. So during which we have another very interesting, also usually very interesting and very interactive session where we discuss the findings, we reinterpret our observation and the fact in order to define the changes that will be required for the product, and also sometimes raise new questions that we want to address on the following next iteration of our study. So what's important here to remember that is we are taking a lot of focus to really learn about our users. We are spending all this effort to ensure that we transform the observation that we and the fact that we can get from this qualitative research, turn them into actionable decisions, and so we can better design the product that fits their needs. So that is the summary of the process. So for TAO Classroom, we so far have discussed with 21 teachers in US and Europe, and we ensure the good coverage in terms of teaching subject, also type of institutions, and also different level of digital maturity. Right. So I hope this quick introduction to the user research process gave you a good idea of how we are conducting this in the backstage. Now I give the token to Aseli, who is going to share with you some interesting findings and insights that we get out of this research.
Thanks, Sam. So I'm going to share some insights and findings from two separate research studies that we conducted. The first research study involved us speaking to K12 teachers in the United States and the United Kingdom. And going into it, we had some assumptions that needed to be validated or invalidated. Our first assumption was that schools in the UK and the US are digitally advanced in terms of the tools that they're using to assess their students. And this assumption was validated, but on top of that, we also learned that this also includes access to devices, so computers and tablets, for example. The second assumption that we had was that teachers share content with each other, which was also validated, but I'll get into that a little bit later. So some general insights from this study were that even with the adoption and use of digital assessments, paper-based assessments remain extremely important. And this is particularly the case for higher stakes assessments that are paper-based, such as the SAT or the GCSE. And delivering some paper-based assessments to students give teachers the confidence that their students are sufficiently prepared for the difference in testing tools as well as the environment. The second insight we learned from this study is that teachers really have the autonomy and the freedom to choose their teaching methods, which means that there's no one dictating to them what their learning materials must be, what their daily classroom activities are, or even how often they assess their students. So as I previously mentioned, an insight that we found through our research in this particular study was that teachers collaborate and they share teaching material as well as the assessment content. And today they do this in Google Suite, and then when they're finished, they'll transfer that content over into their assessment tool of choice. And during our research, we recognized this, and for TAO Classroom introduced a commenting feature that provides teachers with the ability to highlight elements such as text or an image directly in the item and leave a comment so that they can discuss with their peers a little bit more easier. And teachers have an expectation of online collaboration that is very high, and that's primarily because of what they're used to in Google Suite. So it's important that the collaboration in TAO Classroom matches the existing capabilities that they're familiar with. So an additional insight that was directly translated into this solution was regarding education standards. And as we know, education standards really provide a framework for what should be taught. But what we found was that teachers want to see what they're teaching too. So what we've done here, as you can see with the blue arrow, is to show the curriculum standard in relationship to the question, which provides the teacher with the ability to see that they're covering all the necessary content within their assessments. And the ability to see the standard also helps when looking at student progression. So this allows the teacher to have a quick understanding of whether their student has mastered a particular topic or not. Results are used to define the next activities and identify students who are struggling. So we found that teachers will adjust their teaching based off of the results, and this can be at a classroom level or an individual level. At the classroom level, this means that if they do poorly as a group or fantastic as a group, teachers will tweak the following assessments to match their students' level of understanding. And on the individual level, they will look to the results to help them identify which students may be lagging behind, and then reach out to those individual students to discuss how they can improve. In TAO Classroom, this classroom and individual data was visualized with two different views. So the student tab and the question tab, which Sam is politely hovering over right now. And the purpose of them is to really help teachers determine what are the next steps that they need to take. So we validated that teachers find both views equally important in identifying who as well as what to focus on next. The final insight from this study is that teachers use pre-made content to increase their efficiency. So the two images here on the right show two separate digital tools that are currently in use by teachers. And what we learned is that what they value most from these is that it's not only easy for them to create their assessment, but they also have a level of confidence that the content they're using is aligned with their curriculum standards. And so for TAO Classroom, this means offering a bank of pre-made content from sources such as Khan Academy that allow teachers to quickly pull their assessment content from. So for our second study, we focused on speaking to K12 teachers who were based in Europe. And similar to the first study, we had some assumptions. And the first was that European schools were less digitized than their US and their UK counterparts. And this was validated. We saw that unlike in the US, there are far more paper-based assessments, less digital tool usage, and there's more sharing of devices such as computers and tablets across students. The second assumption we had was that teachers are responsible for managing their class rosters, and this was invalidated. What we actually found were that there are regional or countrywide rostering systems that are managed by administrators, and teachers will never actively remove or add a student to their particular class. So some general insights from this study were that there are barriers to digitization. And one of those barriers are budget. So meaning schools don't have large enough budgets whereby they can purchase access to the digital tools as well as the devices that students need to use to access those digital tools. Another constraint relates to more technical. So unreliable internet connection at school, unreliable internet connection at home. The third barrier we found was just in general the mindset. So teachers have a lack of trust in the uptime of digital tools, but also parents aren't always comfortable with their children using digital tools or understanding why they're using digital over paper. And then the following general insight was that teachers really value the day-to-day human interaction that comes with assessing their students. So when doing this, they kind of use their teacher senses, we call it, to determine how students are progressing throughout these interactions. And this means that while they value the efficiency that digital assessments bring and digital tools bring to them, there are some day-to-day interactions that simply can't be translated into the digital world. The third general insight relates to teachers' perception of mandated assessments, and that is that they're primarily used for statistical purposes and that they can have little value due to the frequency of the assessments, the anonymized data, and the communication of the results back to the teachers as well as back to the students. So an insight directly translated into our solution was that the TAO Classroom gradebook may not be the official gradebook. The rostering systems that I previously mentioned really serve as a place where teachers have to input the student's final grade. So currently they use other tools such as paper or Excel to pre-record results and then manually upload the results into their official rostering system. and they have the freedom to choose how they want to pre-record. They just need to upload those final results into the tool that is mandated. And as a result, TAO Classroom may just serve as the intermediary and not really be the source of truth for the student's grade. Additionally, we found that teachers are concerned surrounding the reliability of digital tools and whether information can be accessed at all times. They prefer to keep important information such as grades in a separate place offline, whether it be a notebook or an Excel file, so that they always have access to it in case something were to go wrong. And as a result of this, we've also added the ability for teachers to download the grade book, which is in the top right-hand corner of this screen I'm showing, to help them feel a little bit more safe, secure, and confident in storing that offline version. And then the last insight on this page is that assessing really goes beyond sitting assessments. And by sitting assessments, we mean the traditional form of assessment whereby a student is in a classroom or an exam room and is provided an exam whereby they then have to turn it into the teacher or the proctor. What we saw was that teachers really assess their students in other ways, such as orally, through discussions or even presentations. And they have the need to also record these types of assessments. And because of that, we've added the ability for teachers to add external activities that may happen outside of TAO Classroom so that they have a more holistic view of a student's grade as well as their progression. So what are our next steps regarding research? We're going to continue to speak with teachers and validate our solution to ensure that it remains a tool that truly brings value to them. And we'll also begin conducting research with other roles, such as principals, department heads, and really anyone who is willing to talk to us. So if you're interested in participating, you can scan this QR code on the right and it'll pop open your email, or you can email us directly at ux-dev@taotesting.com.